Jack's Falls isn't the kind of town that gets written about in travel magazines. Population hovering around 3,000. One main street with a hardware store and a diner that closes at 6. And a coastline so rocky and unwelcoming that even the seagulls seem pissed off about it. The town's claim to fame is its name, which comes from Captain Jack Morgan, a pirate who supposedly fled British naval ships in 1699 and vanished somewhere along our stretch of coast. Local legend says he and his crew made it to shore with their plunder, but were never seen again. Most people assume they got away in a rowboat or died in the surf. I assumed that too, until 3 months ago. Mark had been obsessed with Captain Jack's story since we were kids. He'd grown up on tales his grandfather told him about hidden treasure and secret caves. The kind of thing that sounds awesome when you're 10 and pathetic when you're 27. But Mark never let it go. He'd spent years researching old naval records, studying tide patterns, hiking every inch of coastline looking for cave entrances that matched historical descriptions. His girlfriend Sarah enabled him, mostly because she found his enthusiasm charming and because she liked hiking. Me? I just went along because Mark was my best friend, and I didn't have much else going on. When Mark called me that October morning, I could hear the tremor in his voice before he even said hello. I found it, John. I actually fucking found it. He'd been exploring a section off a cliff face about 2 miles north of town, somewhere we'd passed dozens of times without noticing anything unusual. But the recent storm had caused a minor rock slide, and Mark had spotted something that made him scramble down to investigate. A small opening, partially concealed by centuries of erosion and debris, but unmistakably man-made around the edges. He'd taken photos, measurements, and coordinates. He wanted to go back with proper equipment. It's this weekend or never, he said. Tide patterns won't be this favorable again until next year, and you know the county's been talking about putting up fencing along the whole stretch. This is it, John. This is actually it. I should have said no. I had a dozen good reasons. My knees weren't what they used to be. I had work on Monday, cave diving or spelunking, or whatever the hell you wanted to call crawling around in tight, dark spaces, had never been my idea of fun. But Mark had that tone in his voice that meant he was going with or without me. Unfortunately, I'd known him since we were 10. I couldn't let my best friend do something that stupid alone. Sarah picked me up Saturday morning in Mark's truck, the bed already loaded with gear, helmets with mounted lights, ropes, carabiners, a first aid kit that looked military grade, energy bars, water bottles, and what looked like a small sledgehammer, in case we need to widen anything. Sarah explained when she caught me staring. She was tall, athletic. From what Mark told me, she ran marathons for fun and had opinions about specific hydration packs. She worked as a physical therapist and approached Mark's treasure hunting with the same practical enthusiasm she brought to helping people recover from knee surgery. Mark's already down there doing a preliminary scout. He's been up since 4. The drive took 20 minutes, the last 5 on a dirt road that barely qualified as a path. We parked where the trees gave way to scrub grass and jagged rocks, the ocean visible as a gray-blue line in the distance. The wind coming off the water was cold enough to sting. Mark was waiting by the cliff's edge, practically vibrating with excitement. He'd rigged a rope system to make the descent easier, and he walked us through it twice before we started down. The climb down wasn't terrible, maybe 30 feet of careful scrambling, but it was enough to get my heart rate up. The cave entrance was exactly as unimpressive as I feared. A crack in the rock face, maybe 3 feet high and 2 feet wide. Mark had cleared away some of the smaller debris, but it still looked like the Earth's asshole. You sure about this? I asked. The historical records are clear, Mark said. pulling out his phone to show me a photo of a yellow document. British naval logs from HMS Dartmouth, dated November 1699. They chased Morgan's crew to this exact stretch of coast. The pirates made it to shore, but never came back out. The naval captain assumed they had a ship awaiting on the other side of the peninsula, but there's no record of Morgan or his crew ever surfacing again. 18 men, John, 18 men in a cargo hold worth of Spanish silver just vanished? Maybe they drowned, I said. Then where are the bodies? Mark's eyes had that gleam I recognized, the one that meant he'd already made up his mind and was just gonna go through the motions of conversation. This cave goes somewhere. I can feel the air moving. There's space in there. Sarah was already putting on her helmet, checking her light. We stick together. We stay in radio contact, and if anything feels wrong, we turn back. Deal? I wanted to say no. I wanted to suggest we call someone official, get proper permits, and do this the right way, but I could see the desperation in Mark's face, the way his hands kept clenching and unclenching. This was his white whale, his one shot at proving all those years of research weren't wasted. Sarah was already checking her gear. The opening was right there, and I was already putting on my helmet. We went in a single file. Mark was first with the biggest light, then Sarah, then me bringing up the rear. Now, I'm not a big guy, but the entrance was still a tight squeeze. I had to turn my shoulders and exhale to fit through. Rocks scraped against my back and chest simultaneously. For about 10 feet, it felt like I was being swallowed. The walls pressed in from all sides, and then it suddenly opened up. The first chamber was about the size of a large bedroom. The ceiling high enough to stand in most places, our light cut through the darkness, revealing rough stone walls and a floor that sloped gently downward. The air was cool, but not cold, with a faint smell I couldn't quite place. Mineral, maybe salt, yet there was something organic underneath it all. See? Mark's voice echoed slightly. This is definitely man-made. Look at the walls. He was right. In places you could see tool marks, spots where someone had deliberately widened the passage or smoothed away irregularities. It wasn't obvious, not unless you were looking for it. But once Mark pointed it out, I couldn't unsee it. So we moved deeper. The cave branched twice, but Mark seemed confident about which way to go. Consulting a hand-drawn map he'd made based on his research, he'd overlaid British naval charts with geological surveys and local folklore, creating a composite that supposedly showed the most likely route the pirates would have taken. I didn't understand half of it, but Sarah seemed convinced enough to keep following. The temperature stayed consistent, that cool but not cold feeling, and the faint smell grew stronger. Not quite mineral anymore, something else. Copper pennies, maybe. Old metal. I caught myself breathing through my mouth to avoid it, which was stupid because then I could taste it instead. About 40 minutes in, we stopped to drink water and check our bearings. Mark's excitement was palpable, but I noticed Sarah was quieter than usual. When I asked if she was okay, she just nodded and said the smell was getting to her too. We agreed to give it another hour before turning back, regardless of what we found. The passage narrowed and widened in irregular patterns, sometimes forcing us to crouch, other times opening into spaces where our lights couldn't quite reach the ceiling. In one larger chamber, we found the remains of old torches, just charred bits of wood that crumbled when Mark tried to pick one up. Evidence someone had been here before, which made sense given the pirate story, but also made the place feel more oppressive somehow. It was as if we were following the footsteps of doomed men. There, Sarah said suddenly, pointing her light at the wall. Scratched into the stone, barely visible, were marks. Not random scratches, but deliberate cuts. Symbols that might have been letters worn smooth by time. Mark ran his fingers over them, his breath coming faster. He pulled out his phone and took several photos from different angles. "This is it," he whispered. "This is actually it. This is 17th century script. I'm sure of it. Look at the way the R's are formed and the long S that looks like an F. This is period accurate." He was nearly trembling as he traced the letters, his academic background in colonial history finally paying off in the most literal way possible. The passage narrowed again, forcing us to crouch and then crawl. My knees immediately regretted every decision that had led me here. The walls felt closer now, and I became acutely aware of the tons of rocks above us, and the ocean somewhere beyond that. The very real possibility of getting stuck or lost or even worse. After maybe 20 minutes of crawling, my hands were scraped raw. Even through my gloves and my knees felt like they'd been beaten by a hammer. The passage opened into another chamber. This one larger than the first, maybe 15 feet across and about 10 feet high. Our lights played across the walls, revealing more tool marks and what looked like old scorch marks from torches. Then Mark swept his light around and froze. Holy shit. The skeleton was slumped against the far wall, still wearing the rotted remains of what might have been a coat. The fabric had long since degraded to brown tatters, but you could still make out what might have been brass buttons scattered on the ground nearby. The skull had tipped forward, jaw hanging open in a silent scream, and one arm was extended, as if reaching for something. Around the bones were scraps of leather, a rusted knife that had been corroded almost completely away, and what looked like the remains of a small barrel. The wooden staves collapsed inward. Sarah yelped like she'd been punched. Mark just stood there, staring, his light steady on the corpse. "Is this real?" Sarah asked. "It's real." Mark's voice was barely above a whisper. He moved closer, careful not to disturb anything, playing his light over the remains. "Look at the clothing, the style of the coat, the buttons. This is late 17th century. I bet my life on it. This is one of them. One of Morgan's crew." But what made us all stop and really stare was the wall behind the skeleton. Someone had carved words into the stone. Not just a few marks, but entire paragraphs. The letters crude but deliberate. Clearly done with something small and sharp. Probably that knife. Over what must have been days or weeks, the text started high up on the wall and descended in ragged columns, getting harder to read as it went down. Mark moved closer, playing his light over the text, and began to read aloud. His voice shook slightly. November 15th, 1699. We are 12 now. The cave goes deeper than we thought. Captain says there's a way through to the other side of the peninsula, but Davies and Mockton went looking 2 days past and haven't returned. We hear them sometimes calling from below, but we search and find nothing. The handwriting was rough, the spelling inconsistent in the way of men who had learned their letters late in life. But the message was clear. Mark moved his light down, finding more text carved in shaking lines. November 18th. The food is running low. Captain has ordered rationing. We dare not to go back the way we came. The Navy dogs are surely awaiting at the entrance. James swears he heard Davies calling from somewhere below, but we search and find nothing. The air tastes wrong down here. Thomas says it's the damp, but I know better. Something's not right. Jesus, Sarah breathed. She moved closer to me and I realized she was shaking. More text, the letters growing more cramped and erratic as they descended the wall, like the writer had been running out of space, or time, or sanity. November 22nd. 5 more are gone. They went deeper, seeking another way out, seeking fresh air, seeking anything but this tomb. The captain is changing. He speaks of voices in the dark. William says the treasure is cursed and we should leave it. Abandon it in the deepest hole we can find, but the captain will not hear of it. He guards it like a dragon guards gold in the old stories my mother used to tell. The walls feel warm to the touch, which makes no sense this deep. We are far below the sun's reach. The water that drips from above is thick and sticky, not clean like it should be. It leaves stains on our clothes. Jacob drank some yesterday despite warnings and had been sick ever since. He cannot stop shitting himself. The smell is awful. I reached out and touched the wall where the writer had mentioned warmth. The corpse was right. It was warm. Not hot, but distinctly warmer than it should be this far underground. At least 10 degrees warmer than the air around it. I pulled my hand back and found my fingertips slightly damp, with the same sticky residue. "Keep reading," I said. Mark continued, his light moving to text that was barely legible now. The letters scratched so hard and fast they'd gouge the stone in places, leaving deep furrows that our lights cast shadows in. November 27th. 3 of us remain. Jacob died yesterday. We buried him in the tunnel, but this morning he was gone, as if the cave swallowed him whole. The captain has taken the treasure and Thomas deeper into the cave. He says the voices told him where to go. He is mad. We are all mad. The cave breathes, I swear it. At night I hear it, a great bellowing sound like a whale. The walls pulse. Yesterday I saw John Carver embedded up in the rock up to his waist, still alive but unable to move, his eyes following me as I passed. He was begging me for help, but I did not know what to do. I tried to dig him out, but the rock was soft like clay, and it only made him sink deeper. When I returned hours later, he was gone. Only a stain remaining, like someone had spilled wine. The thing in the caves, it hungers, it feeds slowly, it savors. "Okay," I said. "Okay, we should go back." "Are you kidding?" Mark's eyes were wild in the light of his headlamp. "This is it, John. This is the actual historical record of what happened to them. And the treasure," he says, "the captain took it deeper. It's still down there." "Mark, this is clearly a man losing his mind," Sarah said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Walls that breathe, people embedded in rock. He was starving and dehydrated." "Then explain this." Mark pointed to a spot on the wall where the text ended. There, carved with what must have been the last of the writer's strength, were the final words. "It took them all. It will not let us leave." Below that, a date, December 3rd, 1699. And below that, scratched so deep, the stone had cracked. "It beats." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of our breathing and faint dripping somewhere in the darkness beyond our lights. "There's another passage," Mark said, pointing to a gap in the far wall. "If the captain went deeper, that's where he'd have gone. The treasure is down there." "Mark, no," I said. "This is insane. We should document this and come back with professionals. By the time we do that, the county will have sealed the cave. You know they will. This is our one chance." He was already moving toward the gap, Sarah following after a moment's hesitation. I looked at the skeleton one more time, at those empty eye sockets and that reaching hand, and then I followed my friends deeper into the earth. The passage was tighter than anything we'd encountered so far. A squeeze that required removing our packs and pushing them ahead of us while we crawled on our bellies. The rock pressed in from all sides, and for one horrible moment I was certain I'd gotten stuck. My chest too large for the gap, my hips wedged between unyielding stone. Then something gave way and I popped through into a larger space where Mark and Sarah were waiting. You okay? Sarah asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and my hands were shaking. This chamber was different from the others. The walls had a strange texture, less like rock and more like something else. Coral, maybe, or cartilage, and the smell was stronger here, that copper penny scent mixed with something organic and faintly rotten. Mark ran his hand along the wall and frowned. This doesn't feel like limestone. What does it feel like? Sarah asked. I don't know, it's softer and warm, really warm. I touched the wall myself and immediately regretted it. He was right, it was warm, almost body temperature, and the surface had a slightly yielding quality, like pressing on firm rubber. When I pulled my hand away, my fingertips came back damp with something that wasn't quite water. It was thicker, slightly viscous. When I rubbed my fingers together, it felt alkaline, like the slick you get from dissolving soap. We should turn back, I said, again. Look. Mark's light had found something embedded in the wall. A coin, a gold coin. Its surface tarnished green, but unmistakable. Spanish doubloon has to be. Sarah, take a photo. She did. Her camera flashed momentarily, blinding us all. Mark pulled out a small pry bar from his pack and began working at the coin. Mark, don't. The coin came free with a wet sucking sound. Mark held it up triumphantly, turning it into the light. Then Sarah made a sound and we both looked to where she was pointing. The wall where the coin had been was bleeding. I wish it was stained water or some mineral seepage, but it was blood. Thick, dark blood that welled up from the hole and began to run down the wall in slow rivulets. What the fuck? Mark whispered. The wall around the wound began to pulse, slowly at first, then faster, a rhythmic motion that spread outward in ripples, and somewhere in the distance, deep in the cave, we heard it. A sound like thunder, like drums, like a heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. Okay, Sarah said, her voice tight. Maybe we should. The wall bled faster, the blood now flowing freely, and more of those pulsing ripples spread outward. In my peripheral vision, I saw movement. Other areas of the wall began to shift and flex. We need to go, Sarah said. Now. But Mark was already moving forward, his light catching something in the passage ahead. Wait, do you see that? More coins, dozens of them, embedded in the walls and floor like metal studs and leather, and beyond them a larger space, a chamber. Against every instinct I had, we moved forward. The walls here were unmistakably organic. The texture was wrong, the color was wrong. It had shifted from gray stone to something redder, mottled with darker patches that looked disturbingly like bruises. The floor was wet, covered in a thin film of that same viscous fluid, and our boots made soft, squelching sounds with each step. The heartbeat sound was louder now, no longer distant. It echoed from all directions, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. Thump, 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 thump. The chamber opened before us, and Mark's light found the treasure. It wasn't the pile of gold I think we'd all imagined. Instead, the coins and silver pieces were embedded in the walls and floor, hundreds maybe, all partially absorbed into the red organic tissue that made up the chamber. Some were still visible as distinct objects, others were half dissolved, their edges blurred and melted into the flesh. And in the center of it all, surrounded by the treasure, were the bodies. They should have been skeletons after 300 years, but they weren't. They were corpses, preserved in various states of decay, their clothing rotted to rags, but their flesh still clinging to their bones. Some were embedded in the floor, sunken halfway into the tissue as if the cave had been slowly digesting them. Others stood upright, held in place by growths of that red tissue that wrapped around their limbs and torsos like vines. One wore what might have once been a captain's coat, his jaw hung open, and in the empty socket of his mouth something glistened wetly. This isn't real, Sarah said, but her voice carried no conviction. This can't be real. The heartbeat was so loud it made my ribs vibrate. Thump thump, thump thump. And as I watched, one of those corpses moved. It was subtle at first, just a twitch of the fingers, a slight turn of the head. Then the jaw began to work, opening and closing slowly, and those empty eye sockets seemed to fix on us. Another corpse moved, then another. The tissue that held them in place began to pulse and contract, pushing them forward, helping them move. They pulled free from the walls with wet, tearing sounds, leaving dark cavities behind that immediately began to close. "Run!" I yelled. "Run!" We turned and fled back the way we came, but the passage was changing. The walls were contracting, the space narrowing with each pulse of that massive heartbeat. Behind us I could hear shuffling, scraping sounds as those things pulled themselves from their resting places and began to follow. Mark reached the squeeze point first and threw himself into it, his pack scraping against the walls. Sarah went next, and I could see her struggling, the space tighter than it had been just minutes ago. The walls were warm and wet and moving, contracting slowly like the throat of something swallowing. I glanced back and saw them coming, moving with horrible purpose. Their movements were jerky and wrong, limbs bending in directions they shouldn't. The captain was in front, and as I watched, he opened his mouth, and that wet, gleaming thing inside flexed and reached forward. I threw myself into the squeeze and immediately realized I was in trouble. The space was too tight now, the walls pressing in from all sides. I could hear Sarah ahead of me, could see Mark's light on the other side, but I couldn't move forward. The tissue around me pulsed and contracted, and I felt something give way beneath my stomach, the floor softening and beginning to pull me down. "John!" Mark's voice distant and panicked. "John, move!" I pushed with everything I had, my pack catching on something, my helmet scraping rock. Behind me, one of those things reached the squeeze and began to force its way in, its body compressing and bending in ways that made my stomach turn. I could smell it now, that rotting copper smell, and I could feel its breath on the back of my neck. The floor beneath me softened further, and with horror I realized it wasn't just soft, it was dissolving. I could feel the fabric of my pants beginning to stick to it, fibers pulling free, the material weakening, the tissue was digesting me, slowly but surely breaking me down. With a final desperate heave, I pushed forward, felt something in my chest pop, and then I was through. Tumbling, Mark grabbed me and hauled me to my feet. "Go, go, go," Sarah yelled. We ran. The walls pulsed with each heartbeat, narrowing and widening, trying to slow us down. More of those things were appearing, pulling themselves from the walls like hatching insects, their movements growing more coordinated as we watched. The tissue responded to them, differently, helping them rather than hindering them, pushing them forward while trying to hold us back. We reached the skeleton and the writing, and I thought we might make it. The entrance was just beyond. Daylight would be just beyond that. We just had to reach the rope, climb up, get in the truck, and leave this nightmare behind. Mark screamed. I turned in time to see him go down hard. The first skeleton we saw latched onto his ankle with a grip that made him cry out in pain. His helmet flew off, the lights spinning across the floor. More of them were pouring through the passage behind us, at least 5 or 6 that I could see, and more beyond them. Mark was on his stomach, kicking frantically with his free leg, trying to break loose. The thing that had him wasn't letting go. Its fingers had sunk into his jeans, and where they gripped, I could see dark stains spreading, the fabric dissolving under its touch. Sarah dove for him without hesitation, grabbing his arms, trying to pull him free. Her face was twisted with effort and terror, tears screaming down her cheeks. I've got you, Mark, just hold on." But the thing was winning, dragging him backwards inch by inch toward the others. Mark's fingers scraped against the stone floor, leaving streaks of blood. His eyes found mine, and in them I saw absolute terror. "John, help me!" I took a step forward. My hands clenched into fists. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to help them, to grab Mark's other arm, to fight those things off with whatever I had left. Then I saw what was behind Mark. More of them, at least a dozen, shambling forward from the deeper tunnels with those jerky movements, their bodies bent at wrong angles. The captain was among them, that rotted captain's coat still hanging from his shoulders, and his jaw was working slowly like he was trying to speak. Behind them, the passage itself was closing, the walls contracting in visible waves, the organic tissue flexing and pulsing as it moved. The opening was already half the size it had been, and getting smaller with each heartbeat. Thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. Sarah looked up at me, still holding on to Mark, and in her eyes, I saw the same realization I just had. There wasn't time. Even if we got Mark free right now, even if we somehow got past those things, the passage was collapsing and we had seconds. Maybe 30 seconds, maybe less, before we were sealed in here forever with these things and this breathing, digesting nightmare. The passage contracted further, 20 seconds maybe. "John, please." Mark's voice was breaking, cracking with fear and pain and desperation. His free leg was kicking at the thing's face, but it didn't even seem to notice. "Please don't leave me. Sarah, don't let him." I saw the passage ahead constricting further, the opening now barely 3 feet wide. 15 seconds. I saw the things closing in, their hands reaching, their mouths working silently. 10 seconds. I saw Sarah straining to hold on to Mark, her boots losing purchase on the floor as it began to soften beneath her weight. The tissue was responding to her, starting to digest her too. In a few more seconds, she'd be stuck, and then she'd be trapped too. And then we'd all die here. 5 seconds. And I ran. Not toward them, away. Toward the entrance passage, toward daylight, toward escape, toward being the only one who survived. "John!" Sarah's scream echoed after me, filled with betrayal and rage and terror and disbelief. "John, you fucking coward! Come back!" I kept running. My boots pounded against a stone that was rapidly becoming flesh, each step sinking slightly before I pushed off again. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. If I looked back, I would stop, and if I stopped, I would die. Some animal part of my brain had decided that my life was worth more than theirs. No, John, please, Mark." Sarah's voice was receding now, but I could still hear her sobbing. "Mark, hold on. I won't leave you. I won't." The passage was narrowing fast now, the organic tissue contracting in waves that chased me up toward the surface. Behind me I could hear Sarah crying, could hear Mark begging, could hear the wet sounds of the cave responding to them. The things must have reached them. I heard Sarah scream again, heard Mark cry out, heard sounds I will never be able to forget and can never describe. I kept running. The guilt hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. My legs were moving on their own, pure animal panic overriding everything else. Friendship, loyalty, basic human decency. I was going to survive, and they were going to die, and that was just how it was going to be. I reached the next chamber, the one we'd passed through on the way in, and I could hear footsteps behind me. Not the shuffling of those corpse things, but the running footsteps of someone alive. I risked a glance back and saw Sarah. She'd let go of Mark. She'd make the same choice I had. Her face was streaked with tears and blood, her own blood from where one of those things had touched her. She was sobbing as she ran, her breathing ragged and desperate. When she saw me looking back, she screamed something I couldn't make out over the sound of my own heartbeat, and the cave's heartbeat, and the wet sliding sounds of those things pursuing us both. We ran together toward the entrance passage, the tunnel that would take us up and out, back to daylight and air that didn't taste like copper and stone that was actually stone. I could see the opening ahead, that blessed crack of gray light. And then I saw what was between us and it. The passage was contracting, but not evenly. About 15 feet ahead, the walls were pulling together and apart in a rhythmic motion, opening and closing like a sphincter valve, like the cave was swallowing. The opening would dilate to maybe 4 feet wide, then contract down to less than 2 feet, then open again, Thump thump, open. Thump thump, closed. Thump thump, open. If we timed it right, we could slide through it when it opened. If we timed it wrong, we'd be caught when it's closed. I put on a burst of speed, my lungs burning, my legs screaming. Sarah was right behind me. I could hear her gasping for air. I could hear her boots on the stone that was now flesh. On 3, she shouted. We go on 3. I reached the sphincter first. It was open, the passage wide enough to crawl through, but as I approached it began to close, the walls contracting with muscular force. I waited, counted the rhythm, open for about 3 seconds, closed for 2, open, closed, open. Now, Sarah yelled. I threw myself forward and slid through on my stomach, the walls brushing my back and chest as they contracted around me. For one horrible second, I thought I was stuck, thought the passage would close on me and cut me in half. Then I was through, tumbling into the larger space beyond. I turned back to help Sarah. She was halfway through when the passage spasmed. It wasn't the regular contraction I'd been expecting, but a violent convulsion, like the cave had suddenly clenched every muscle at once. The walls slammed together and caught Sarah's left leg below the knee. She screamed, a sound so full of agony it barely sounded human. "Help me, John! Help me!" I crawled forward, grabbed her outstretched arms and pulled. She screamed louder, her fingers digging into my wrists hard enough to leave bruises I'd find later. But I couldn't move her. The passage had her leg, and it wasn't letting go. When I looked down, I saw why. The floor beneath her was softening, turning from flesh-textured stone into actual flesh. Her caught leg was sinking into it, the fabric of her jeans dissolving where it touched the tissue, and the tissue was moving up her leg, climbing higher, beginning to absorb her. I could see it spreading, and see her pants disintegrating, see her skin starting to blister and melt where the flesh touched it. "Pull harder," she screamed. "For fuck's sakes, John, pull!" I pulled. I braced my feet against the wall and pulled with everything I had. Sarah's hands were slipping in my grip, slick with sweat and that viscous fluid that was everywhere now. Behind her, I could hear movement in the tunnel, could hear those things shambling closer. The passage spasmed again, and Sarah shrieked as it crushed her leg further. I heard bone break, saw her knee bend in a direction it shouldn't. It had her up to mid-thigh now, and it was spreading faster. Her shirt was starting to stick to the ground, the fabric pulling apart, threads separating and dissolving. She looked up at me with eyes that were somehow still fighting, still refusing to accept what was happening to her. "Don't you dare leave me. Don't you fucking dare." Behind her, one of those things reached the sphincter. The captain, his rotted face passing through the wall of flesh, pulling into something that might have been a smile. He reached an arm through the flesh, fingers stretching towards Sarah's back. The passage spasmed again, and this time when it clenched, I saw Sarah's eyes go wide with a different kind of pain. The tissue was inside her now. I realized it had absorbed through her skin and was working on her organs, her blood, everything that made her, her. And the captain's hand was 6 inches from her head. I looked at Sarah. I looked at that hand. I looked at the opening beyond that was starting to close, the exit that would trap me here if I didn't move in the next 5 seconds. Sarah saw it in my face, saw the calculation, saw the decision I was making. "John, no. Don't you dare. Don't." I let go of her hands. She reached for me, fingers grasping, face twisted with betrayal and desperation. "John!" I backed up, just out of her reach. The captain's hand was almost on her now. Sarah's hand stretched toward me, fingers splayed, one last desperate attempt to grab me and pull me back into this nightmare with her, to make me share the fate since I'd chosen to abandon her. I kicked her hand away. It wasn't a hard kick, it didn't need to be. Just enough force to knock her arm aside, to give me the extra second I needed to turn and throw myself at the closing gap. Her scream followed me. "You coward! You fucking coward! I hope it finds you. I hope it never lets you go." I squeezed through the narrowing space, felt tissue close around me, felt it begin to pull and digest and absorb. For one terrible moment, I was certain I would die there, stuck halfway between chambers while the cave slowly consumed me and Sarah's screams echoed in my ears. Then my fingers found purchase on harder stone, real stone, and I pulled with strength born of absolute terror. The tissue tore as I ripped free, leaving strips of my clothes and skin behind, and then I was crawling toward light and air and escape. And then I was out, tumbling down the cliff face, the rope Mark had rigged catching me after a short fall. I hung there, gasping, my entire body shaking, and I heard it, from inside the cave, muffled by rock but still audible. John, please. It's got Sarah, it's... Mark's voice? Still alive, still conscious, still begging me to come back? I hauled myself up the rope, ignored the screaming, scrambled to the top of the cliff, and ran for Mark's truck. The keys were still in Sarah's pocket, but Mark had hidden a spare under the wheel like we always had. I started the engine with shaking hands and drove away without looking back. I told the police I'd gone alone, that Mark and Sarah had stayed behind, planning a different hike, that I'd suggested they check the caves, but they'd seemed more interested in the coastal trail. I lied to their parents, to their friends, to the search and rescue teams that spent 2 weeks looking for them. I lied to everyone. The cave entrance had sealed itself. When the rescuers finally found it 3 days later, it looked like it had been closed for centuries. Just another crack in the rock face that led nowhere. They went in with equipment, cameras, and found only stone. The chambers were gone, the passage collapsed, the organic tissue vanished like it had never existed. But I know the truth. I know what's down there, breathing in the dark, digesting my friends slowly over years, or decades, or centuries. I know that somewhere in that living rock, Mark and Sarah are still conscious, still aware, their bodies breaking down cell by cell, while the cave savors them like a fine wine. And I know I left them there. I moved away from Jack's Falls 3 weeks after they were declared missing. I couldn't take the look from their families, couldn't sleep in that apartment knowing they'd help me move in, couldn't walk past the diner where Sarah used to order extra hash browns and Mark would make fun of her for it. I thought the distance would help. It didn't. 3 days after I escaped, I found something in my pocket. The gold coin. The one Mark had pried from the wall. The one that had made it bleed. I don't remember picking it up. I don't remember putting it in my pocket. But there it was, crusted with dried blood that wasn't mine. I threw it in a dumpster 6 blocks from my new apartment. The next morning, it was on my nightstand. I drove it 2 hours into the countryside and hurled it into a lake. I watched it sink into dark water. That night, I woke up with it clutched in my fist, my hand closed so tight around it that the edges had cut into my palm. My sheets were soaked with sweat and that same sticky residue. My pillow smelled like copper. I tried putting it in a safety deposit box. The bank called me the next day saying there had been some kind of mistake with my box number, and when I went to check, the box was empty, and the coin was in my car's cup holder. So now I keep it. I carry it with me everywhere because I've learned that fighting it only makes things worse. And every day it gets a little warmer. Every day I can feel its pulse a little stronger, that rhythmic beat that matches what I heard in that cave. Sometimes when I hold it, I can hear them. Not voices exactly, but something like voices. A distant screaming that might be wind in a tunnel or might be something else. And buried under that sound, 2 words repeated over and over in Sarah's voice. Come back, come back, come back. Last week I caught myself looking up driving directions to Jack's Falls. I don't remember opening my phone. I don't remember typing anything, but there it was. Route calculated. Estimated arrival time, 3:47 a.m. The coin is getting hotter. Last night it burned my palm when I held it, leaving a mark that looks disturbingly like a mouth. When I sleep, I dream of tunnels, of warm, wet walls that pulse with life, of my friends embedded in red tissue, their eyes following me as I walk past. And the worst part? The part that keeps me up at night, staring at the ceiling, unable to escape what I've done. Sometimes when I hold the coin, I can hear the heartbeat. Thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. And I know with absolute certainty that it's waiting for me to come back. The cave remembers me. It tasted me when I tore free, got a sample of what I am, and now it wants the rest. It's patient. This thing that's been alive since before humans learned to make fire, since before the pirates stumbled into its mouth and became just another meal to be savored over centuries. It can wait. It has time, and eventually, whether from guilt or curiosity or some pull I can't even begin to understand, I know I'll go back. The cave is patient, and it hungers. If you're reading this and you live near Jack's Falls, stay away from the cliffs. North of town, don't go looking for cave entrances or pirate treasure. Don't investigate if you hear sounds coming from the rock's face. And if you do go, despite this warning, despite everything I've told you, if you find yourself in a tunnel that feels too warm, if you see coins embedded in flesh-like walls, if you hear a heartbeat echoing through the dark, run. Don't look back. Don't try to save anyone. Don't hesitate. Just run and pray it lets you go.